The cameras were rolling. The audience was electric. Not with joy, but with expectation. To cultural titans. To wildly different minds. Keanu Reeves. Elon Musk. Sitting across from each other, on a live panel discussion, about the future of humanity. Of morality. Of meaning. No one expected what came next. It was supposed to be light. A conversation about AI Neuralink. Technology's place in our world. But one moment. One question changed everything. And it wasn't even asked by the host. It came from the audience. A soft voice. A teenager, maybe 17, trembling slightly. She stood up and asked, "If machines can think like humans, do we even matter anymore?" The room fell silent. The host didn't respond. Neither did the panel, until Elon smirked. His tone was playful, detached. "Well, that depends. If you believe consciousness is just chemical signals, then you're no more important than a toaster. Maybe a fancy toaster. But still." Laughter, scattered and uncomfortable. The girl sat down, small, embarrassed. And then Keanu spoke softly, deliberately. "But a toaster doesn't cry when it loses someone it loves." Elon turned to him. "You're being emotional," he said. "I'm being scientific." Keanu didn't flinch. "No," he said. "You're being logical. I'm being human." The room shifted. The tone had changed. No one knew it yet, but that was the beginning of the moment. Everything fell silent. Elon leaned back, amused. "So you'd rather live in fantasy than face the truth of your biology?" Keanu looked at him. Not with anger, not with contempt. Just calm clarity. "I'd rather die believing love has meaning," he said, "than live in a world where it's just a glitch in the brain." The audience murmured something had cracked open. Because this wasn't just a tech debate anymore. This was a battle for the soul. And Elon wasn't ready for that kind of war. "I get it," Elon said, waving a hand. "You're the soulful actor, the artist. You talk about grief and hope and love like they're scientific principles." "They're not," Keanu said. "They're more important." Now the audience was locked in, no clapping, no interruptions, just raw attention. "You talk about uploading consciousness," Keanu said. "But you can't upload a soul." Elon chuckled, but it didn't land. Keanu continued. "You can replicate patterns, emotions, responses, but you can't replicate the ache someone feels when they look at the stars and wonder if someone's listening." That hit different. Because you could feel it. Even Elon. He looked away for half a second, just enough to know. The words landed, and the crowd knew it too. This wasn't Keanu the actor. This was Keanu the mirror. Reflecting everything we forgot in our race to digitize the divine. "Humans aren't code," he said. "We're story, we're loss, we're sacrifice." Then he looked out at the girl in the crowd. "And you matter," he told her. "Because you ask questions machines can't answer." A single clap. Then more. Not thunderous. Not forced. Just people moved. And Elon, he smiled. But this time, it didn't reach his eyes. The applause faded, but something hung in the air now, like static just before lightning strikes. Elon leaned forward, eyes narrowing just slightly. "You know what I think, Keanu?" he said, voice calm but sharp. "I think people romanticize suffering. They cling to meaning because the alternative scares them." Keanu didn't blink. "I think you mistake love for weakness," he replied, "and pain for something that needs to be erased." The host tried to jump in, steer things back to tech, to innovation, but neither man was listening, because now this was about something deeper. Not data, not science, but the soul. Elon chuckled, tapping his pen against the table. "You talk about love like it's a force," he said. "It's not. It's chemicals, hormones, dopamine and oxytocin. Your brain tricks you into feeling connected, but that's not magic, it's evolution." Keanu's voice was calm, measured. "So is light," he said. "It's just waves, just particles. And yet, we built entire civilizations trying to reach it." The crowd stirred again. Elon smirked. "You can romanticize whatever you want, but at the end of the day, your heart is a pump. Your thoughts are just reactions. Everything you believe is math." Keanu looked at him, not with disdain, but with something else. Sadness. Double quotes. "Is that all you see?" he asked quietly. "Equations." Elon raised an eyebrow. "What else is there?" Keanu leaned in. "When you watched your child take their first breath, did you measure the oxygen intake? Or did you weep?" Elon's face shifted barely, but enough for the room to notice, because this wasn't a script anymore. This wasn't a debate. This was something ancient, primal, human. I've held someone I loved as they died, Keanu said. I felt the moment when presence becomes absence, and I promise you, there was no algorithm that could explain that. Elon leaned back, still composed, but not untouched. You think pain proves something sacred exists? He asked. I think surviving it does, Keanu said. A pause. A heartbeat. You say we're just code, Keanu continued. But code doesn't dream. Code doesn't grieve. Elon crossed his arms, his voice lowering. And what if grief is the flaw? What if eliminating suffering makes us stronger? Keanu shook his head. Suffering doesn't break us. It reveals us. Now the audience was leaning in. Not just watching, feeling, because they knew this wasn't a conversation about machines. It was a battle for meaning. Elon pressed further. So you'd rather live in a world full of pain and wonder than one where everything is predictable and perfect? Keanu didn't hesitate. Double quotes, yes. Why? Because a perfect world, without love, is just machinery. A single breath, a ripple through the room. You can build a god out of metal, Keanu said, but it'll never bleed for you. That line, that single, haunting line, it froze the room. And Elon. He looked away again, just for a second. But in that second, everything shifted. The silence in the room wasn't awkward anymore. Was reverent, heavy, charged. Something had shifted, not just in the conversation, but in the air itself. Elon Musk stared across the table at Keanu Reeves. Still calm, still calculating, but beneath the cool exterior, a flicker, something unsettled. You're good at words, Elon said, but words don't build the future. Data does. Infrastructure does. Ideas do. Keanu nodded. You're right. Ideas build the future. But if you build a world without humanity in it, what have you actually built? The crowd listened in stillness. No laughter, no cheering. Just the deep, collective hum of people witnessing something real. You speak like we're all bound by the past, Elon said. Fear, emotion, myth. But I'm trying to free us from that. Keanu's eyes softened. You're not freeing us, he said. You're severing us, Elon smirked. From what? Fairy tales. From the very things that make life worth living. A pause. And then Keanu leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. Let me ask you something, Elon. If your machines could think, if your Neuralink could capture the mind, would it remember the feel of your mother's hands on your face? Elon blinked. Keanu continued. Would it remember the ache in your chest the first time your heart broke? Would it understand why people still kneel beside hospital beds to pray, even when they know science can't save them? The room froze. Because it wasn't rhetorical. Keanu wasn't performing. He was reaching. Not to debate, but to remind. These moments, he said, aren't flaws in our system. They're fingerprints, proof that we were made for something more. Elon's voice was quieter now, more cautious. You're saying technology has no place in the future? Keanu shook his head. No, I'm saying it shouldn't replace the soul. We're not trying to escape suffering, we're trying to transcend it. Elon tilted his head. And how do you do that? The question wasn't sarcastic. It was curious. Keanu looked down at his hands for a moment, then up again. You love anyway, he said. You believe anyway. You get up in the morning, even when the weight of the world says stay down. That's the real kind of strength, not coding out pain, but walking through it. Now his voice cracked just slightly. I've held dying friends. I've cried until I couldn't breathe. And do you know what got me through it? Elon didn't answer. Keanu did. Not information. Not updates. Not machines. He paused. It was a hand. A prayer. A single voice saying, you're not alone. And then silence. True silence. Not just in the studio, but in the audience's hearts. Because every person watching, whether in that moment, or years later on a screen, suddenly remembered the one thing they'd forgotten. That in the race toward the future, they'd stopped asking what it meant to be human. Keanu leaned back slowly. I'm not against the future, he said. I'm just not willing to lose my soul to get there. That's when the host, silent for nearly 10 minutes, finally whispered, wow. And the audience. They didn't erupt, they stood. Not because they were told to, but because something sacred had just happened. No special effects. No mic drop. Just a man who remembered what the rest of us had forgotten. And reminded us, gently. The standing ovation didn't erupt. It rose. Like smoke from something holy. No music, no applause, signs, just people on their feet. Moved, not by power, not by fame, but by something true. Elon sat still, unmoving, his fingers tapped slowly on the table, but his eyes were distant. You could see it. He was somewhere else now, not in the spotlight, not in the tech dot, but in a memory. Maybe of a moment that didn't fit into numbers. A voice, a hand, a loss. The host finally spoke, barely, above a whisper. I didn't expect this. Keanu looked over, his voice steady. No one ever expects silence, not until they need it. The lights didn't dim. The cameras didn't cut away, but the energy had changed. The room felt like a cathedral now, because truth had entered, and no one wanted to leave. The teenage girl who'd asked the question earlier, the one Elon had brushed off, stood up again. This time, no shaking in her voice. "Thank you," she said to Keanu, "for seeing us." Keanu didn't respond with words. He just placed a hand on his heart and bowed his head dashed slightly. It was all he needed to say. Elon finally stood, not to argue, not to reclaim the stage, but because something inside him was shifting. You could see it in his eyes. Not defeat, not shame, just humility. He turned to Keanu. "I may never believe what you believe," he said. Keanu nodded. "You don't have to. Just don't forget to feel." The two men shook hands. No grudge. No bitterness. Just two men standing at the crossroads of future and soul. Elon walked off stage quietly, not out of retreat, but reflection. Keanu sat for a moment longer, then stood, slow and deliberate. As he turned to leave, the host asked, "What do we do now?" Keanu paused, then said, "Build. But don't forget to bleed." The screen faded to black. No credits. New auto music, just one line in white letters. "A machine can think, but only a soul can love." And that was all it took. Millions would watch the clip, but more importantly, they'd feel it. Because for once, a conversation didn't end in noise. It ended in stillness. The kind that changes everything.